So as a postscript, as a secondary to the last video on framing, one interesting comment came out years ago that's always interesting to me by Neil deGrasse Tyson, the famous science popularizer, the cool black hip science guy with the deep voice. He made a comment years ago, I actually don't remember the exact numbers, but the general gist of it was something like, in the last 20 years have produced something like 95% of the scientists that have ever been. So what he means is that through time, smaller percentages of people were scientists and made scientific discoveries, but we have in modern times an explosion of scientists, and he's certainly implying we have an explosion of scientific discoveries. And what a marvelous thing, what an amazing thing. Once again, this is a certain framing, because what he's implying in his framing is that this is a good thing, because all the scientists we have now, this explosion of scientists in the last couple of decades, that they're all the same quality of thinker, the same quality of scientist as people like Galileo or Newton, the classic geniuses who made huge leaps forward in human thought and created science, or Maxwell, etc. And this is a very pernicious way of lying, because it's lying as a half-truth. You know, it's letting people make the assumption that all scientists are equal. And so if we have 1,000 times more scientists today than a few hundred years ago, we must have 1,000 times as many Einsteins and Newtons and Poppers and Maxwells, you know, understanding the complexities of the universe and, you know, making all these great leaps forward. But of course, my thoughts on that are very different. I think, let's think about IQ. We haven't had an explosion of high IQ people. In fact, it's gone down. We've got less high IQ people than we have, 150 years ago. Apparently in the 1800s, the European white population was 15 points average higher IQ than now. So we're actually getting dumber. So Neil deGrasse Tyson won't tell you that. Maybe he knows that, maybe he doesn't, but he certainly won't tell you that, because his job is to proselytize science, get you excited about science, get you to realize that the new priests are the white lab coats figuring everything out, providing you all the answers, mindfulness and sustenance you need in this life. That's what his job is, to convince you of. But if we look at the idea that we're actually dumber than in the past, we have less geniuses than in the past, our average IQ is lower than in the past, yet we have this explosion of scientists, all it means is that more fucking idiots are doing, quote, science and thinking that they're top shit and special. Now, I also heard another theory from a psychologist. I was reading it on Quora. I don't know for sure. It's not the sort of thing I could provide some 115 IQ point more on a study on, a quote study. But I did read this idea on Quora from a psychologist that human beings effectively don't really have much in common, and even communication is somewhat difficult with an IQ gap of 30 points. Now, IQ is not everything, but it definitely is a thing. I've done quite a few IQ tests in my journey to understand the world and my place in it, and I can safely say that I certainly don't have much in common with the average person and their IQ. So I really think what's going on, you know, when you get all these people, oh, trust the science, trust the science. Scientists say, all that's happened is the universities have bloated, bureaucracies have bloated, and you're just getting more average morons doing what they're told and being told that it's science. And you know, that's what everyone's saying, you know, science is the new priesthood. You can't question it. And most people, you know, who don't have the faculties to read a lot, to understand a lot of complex abstractions, you know, if you want to test your IQ, see how complex an abstraction you can build in your mind and you can follow other people talking about. I noticed this myself when you say something abstract and you almost get a flow chart. If this, then that, if this, then that. And you have a flow chart of information before you arrive at a conclusion. A lot of people get lost after the first or second idea. You're trying to build a castle of ideas to highlight the larger picture as to why you might arrive at a certain conclusion. And when people can't follow those abstractions very easily, that's going to come down to IQ. I think so anyway, it's definitely my experience. And so just know as well, you know, you can't go up against some, you know, even, you know, 115 IQ person who has done a university degree, maybe even a master's, essentially, you know, paint by numbers degrees, where they get told what to do every step of the way, and then they have a result at the end and they go, wow, science. You know, you can't argue with those people because they're already indoctrinated, so there's no point. But just know in your heart of hearts, in your own mind, you know, all these people now who say, oh, trust the science, the science. Well, you know what? Science is largely a new religion, a new priesthood, and it's being administered by a whole bunch of people who are nowhere near as intelligent as they think they are, but because they wear the lab coat or they have their paint by numbers science degree, they think that they are superior to you. And so when everyone's trust the science, everyone's battling over the science and dissecting numbers, just know a lot of these people are fucking idiots, and they have never had an original thought in their lives, and they probably can't even handle a complex abstract thought, yet they are the ones in charge of science. But you know, like everything else, it's always just it's all just a new method of crowd manipulation by the ruling elite. You know, I put on a Facebook post one time, most people know that popular music is it's a product. It's a mass-produced product manufactured in back rooms. You get these memes and they say, they might say Freddie Mercury and all his lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody, and they go, one songwriter, Freddie Mercury, but then they show Beyonce, who run this mother, who run this mother, who run this mother, girls, and they go, 10 producers and 6 lyric writers come up with this genius. You know what I mean? They're saying that you've got this, so many people involved pumping out absolute shit. But we all understand this with music. You know, pop is mass produced. They're not the most subtle, sophisticated, emotional, beautiful, high IQ artists out there. You know, if you want, in a lot of ways, real music, you know, a lot of stuff that's popular is really great. I'm not shitting on pop music in general, but a lot of stuff that is just meaningless, one-dimensional cardboard cutout, absolute diarrhea, gets mass-produced and shoved down your throat. Well, why do you think any other industry is any different? food. What's what gets shoved down most people's throat? The mass-produced fucking diarrhea. You know, and so what I'm saying is that any industry is going to be like that, is that what most people have rammed down their gullets is just lowest common denominator, mass-produced diarrhea. And science as an industry, it's no different. It's no different. So just remember, you know, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, do not be intimidated. They say, oh, we've got so many scientists, all these scientists. They're like, no, you've got a whole bunch of fucking idiots doing paint by numbers degrees and squishing their noses up at you in self-righteous indignation at the thought that you might think for yourself. That's all that's going on.